You know, after sitting on this bench for more than 4 decades, you start to believe you've seen every kind of person walk through those courtroom doors. Police officers come before me fairly often, most of them honest, hard-working folks who risk their lives to keep the public safe. They earn our respect. But that Tuesday morning in November, something happened that sent a chill straight through me. Let me paint a picture of Chief Robert Mancuso. Tall man, 6'2", silver hair combed back, uniform crisp like he just stepped out of a magazine. He walked into my courtroom with the kind of confidence that said, "This place belongs to me." And truthfully, in his mind, it probably did, because this was your everyday parking violation or minor charge. The FBI had quietly been building a case on this man for 2 long years. Corruption, bribery, tampering with evidence, the whole dark list. But no one in Providence had the faintest idea. That morning, I arrived early like I always do. Been doing that for 40 years. My father used to say, "Frank, if you're not 10 minutes early, you're late." So there I was at 8:20 a.m., looking over the docket with a cup of strong, black Italian coffee Christina had set beside me. I glanced at my list, and there it was, Chief Robert Mancuso, contempt of court. Now, let me rewind and explain how all of this began. 3 months earlier, we had a case involving Officer Tommy Rodriguez. Good young man. 5 years in uniform husband, father of 2 little girls. He had been accused of using excessive force during a routine traffic stop. There was video, witnesses, official reports, everything you'd expect in a straightforward case. But the deeper we looked, the more things felt off. The partner who was with him that day suddenly misplaced his statement. Then the dash cam footage vanished. Then witnesses started altering their testimonies. Bit by bit, every piece of evidence began disappearing until the entire case was crumbling. That's when the federal prosecutors stepped in. They suspected someone with serious authority was pulling strings, someone powerful enough to make evidence vanish and convince witnesses to rethink their stories. Someone like a police chief. So they issued a subpoena for Chief Mancuso, requiring him to testify under oath about the missing materials. Simple enough. Show up, tell the truth, answer the questions. But Mancuso, he ignored the first notice, then the second, and that's how his name ended up on my docket for contempt of court. As I looked over the morning list, Christina leaned close and murmured, "Judge, this one's different." Different? That barely scratched the surface. In 40 years, I'd seen only a handful of officers appear before me for serious matters, and every single one of them behaved with professionalism. Even when they stood accused, they treated the process with respect. But that morning, something in the air felt wrong. The courtroom held more people than usual. Lawyers I'd never seen before. Men in dark suits filling the back rows. And a woman I later learned was FBI agent Sarah Collins. Though at the time she looked like just another quiet observer. But the way she studied the room told me there was more going on than met the eye. Then at exactly 9:30, in walked Chief Mancuso. And the way he carried himself, as if he were granting us the honor of his presence. No respect, no modesty, just arrogance, plain and simple. A small smirk sat on his face, like all of this was beneath him. And I remember thinking, "Frank, your father didn't raise you to let anyone walk all over your courtroom, badge or no badge." Trailing behind him was his attorney, some high-priced downtown lawyer, with a suit worth more than my monthly paycheck. The type who charges $500 an hour and thinks a judge from a small city can be pushed around. But let me tell you something. I've been dealing with attorneys longer than this man has even been breathing. So I looked straight at him and said, "Chief Mancuso, you ignored a court-ordered summons last week. Do you have any explanation for that?" And what he said next is etched into my memory forever. He stared right back at me and replied, "Judge, with all due respect, I had more important matters to handle. I run a police department. I've got real criminals to deal with, not waste time answering questions about some paperwork." More important matters? Paperwork? This wasn't about misplaced forms. This was a case touching potential witness intimidation and the deliberate destruction of evidence. So I told him, "Chief, In this courtroom, nothing outranks the law. The same law you vowed to honor the day you put that badge on. His lawyer leaned over and whispered something, probably urging him to be quiet and apologize. But Mancuso wasn't interested in apologies. He wanted to show everyone in that room who he believed held the power. Then he did something almost nobody ever dares to do. He stepped closer to my bench without being invited, and he said, "Judge Caprio, maybe you need a little perspective. I've been safeguarding this city for 25 years. I have relationships you couldn't imagine, people of influence, the mayor, the governor, major business figures. They rely on me to keep this place running." I felt my blood pressure rise. You know why? Because I've crossed paths with bullies before. Growing up in Providence, when the streets were rough and respect had to be earned daily, I learned to recognize a bully long before he reached me. My father worked 3 jobs, construction in the mornings, security through the night, and weekends at the docks. And he taught me that no matter how powerful a person thinks they are, they never get the right to misuse that power. And this man, he was the worst kind, a bully with authority, and with 25 years of thinking he was untouchable. "Chief," I said, keeping my voice calm but unwavering, "the only connection that carries weight in this courtroom is your connection to the truth. Now I'll ask you once again, do you understand why you're here?" Instead of answering, he slowly turned toward the audience. The whole room was packed, people trying to understand what would happen next. Then he faced me again, and the look in his eyes was pure disdain. "Judge," he barked, louder now, "I think you need to understand something. I run this city. Not the mayor, not the council, and certainly not you. I decide what goes on in these streets. I decide which cases matter. I decide what evidence counts and what evidence doesn't. And honestly, you're putting me in a very difficult position." The room fell completely silent, absolutely still. You could have heard a pin hit the floor. I've been yelled at before, by drunk drivers furious about losing their licenses, by parents breaking down because their kids were arrested, by people living to the worst day of their lives. But this was different. This was a sworn officer of the law, a man who promised to protect the public, telling a judge he stood above the very laws he swore to defend. I scanned the room. There was old Mrs. Patterson, who's attended hearings for 15 years, looking utterly shocked. There were young law students from Brown University observing the session. "I'm giving you one final opportunity to settle this quietly. Drop the contempt charge. Ignore the federal subpoena, and we all move forward like none of this ever happened. Otherwise what, Chief?" I asked. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice, but in the absolute silence of my courtroom, every syllable carried. "Otherwise," he said, "I might have to make a few calls. Maybe speak to some people about your son Michael's law practice. Interesting how many city contracts his firm seems to land. Someone might want to take a closer look." Now, he was threatening my family, my son, who put himself through law school, who built his practice from scratch, who never once asked me for help. This corrupt police chief was using my family as leverage because I refused to let him dodge a federal order. I rose to my feet again, and for the first time in 40 years on the bench, I felt something deeper than judicial irritation. Not professional annoyance, but genuine, personal anger. A fire I had not felt in decades. "Chief Mancuso," I said, my voice echoing through the still room, "you just crossed a line that no one, and I mean no one, has ever crossed in my courtroom." That's when she stood. Agent Collins. She moved slowly down the aisle, her badge shining on her belt. 3 other agents rose from different corners of the courtroom. People I hadn't even noticed were there. Mancuso turned, and the color drained from his face. The swagger, the arrogant confidence, the threats evaporated in an instant. "Chief Robert Mancuso," Agent Collins announced, her voice steady and clear. "You are under arrest for criminal contempt, obstruction of justice, conspiracy, bribery, violation of civil rights under color law, and threatening a federal judge." I watched the man who had just claimed he ran this town freeze as federal agents surrounded him. Turns out they had been recording everything, every threat, every boast, every admission of corruption. Cameras hidden in the courtroom. Microphones capturing it all. You have the right to remain silent, Agent Collins said as she cuffed him right there in front of everyone. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford one, an attorney will be appointed. Mancuso tried to speak, but she kept going, unfazed. His polished uniform, his shimmering badge, his 25 years of service. None of it mattered now. He was simply another defendant who believed he stood above the law. His attorney was scribbling notes as fast as his hand could move, probably already drafting strategies for damage control. But the truth was, the damage was irreversible. Every second had been recorded. Every word had been heard. As they escorted him out in handcuffs, he turned back toward me. The arrogance had vanished. His shoulders sagged. His face was pale. And in a shaky voice, he whispered, "Judge, I made a terrible mistake." I looked him in the eye and said, "Chief, everyone makes mistakes. The difference is most people don't make theirs while threatening a federal investigation and a sitting judge." Once he was gone, I called for a recess. I needed a moment, not out of fear, but to steady myself. My hands were shaking from the adrenaline, from the fury, from the weight of what had just unfolded. All I could think about was this. How many people had this man bullied over the years? How many cases had been tainted? How many honest officers had been forced to stay silent while he undermined everything their badge stood for? Christina came up to the bench. "Judge, are you okay?" she asked gently. "I'm all right, Christina," I said, "but I can't stop thinking about the officers who serve with honesty every single day. This man just disgraced every badge in the city." As the courtroom was emptying, Agent Collins approached my bench. "Your Honor," she said, "thank you for your patience through this investigation. We've been building this case for 2 years. We needed him to reveal his true character publicly, and you handled it exactly as we hoped." "Agent Collins," I replied, "in my courtroom, everyone is treated the same. Badge or no badge, powerful or powerless. Nobody rises above the law." She nodded. "That's precisely why we conducted this operation here. Your reputation for fairness is well known. We knew you wouldn't be intimidated." And then, within hours, the news was everywhere. Local broadcasts, national networks, cable channels. Headline after headline. Corrupt police chief arrested in courtroom after threatening judge. Chief arrested in Judge Caprio's courtroom after threatening judge. But that wasn't the important part. The important part came in the days and weeks that followed. 3 days later, Officer Maria Santos knocked on my chamber door. Young officer, 5 years on the force, honest as the day is long. She had tears in her eyes. "Judge," she said, "I wanted to thank you." "Thank me for what, Officer Santos?" "For showing us that the badge means something." "Again," she replied. "Chief Mancuso. He was ruining everything we believed in. We couldn't speak up because he had all the power. He had files on everyone. Just like he said, we were afraid. But you showed us that nobody is above the law." That's when my eyes got a little watery. You know why? Because that's what justice really looks like. Not the dramatic arrest, not the headlines, not the news cameras. Justice is when good people can sleep at night knowing that the system works for everyone. A week later, I got a visit from Detective Frank Torres, a 20-year veteran. He told me that Chief Mancuso had been running a protection racket for years. Business. Owners who didn't pay up would suddenly find themselves getting more tickets. More inspections, more harassment. Honest cops who asked questions would find themselves transferred to the worst neighborhoods or passed over for promotions. "Judge," Detective Torres said, "we've been waiting for someone to stand up to him for years. You gave us our department back." 2 weeks after the arrest, the interim police chief, Captain Williams, implemented new oversight procedures. Body cameras for all officers. Civilian review board for complaints. Transparency in all investigations. The federal government stepped in with monitors to ensure the reforms were real. 6 months later, I got a letter from the new permanent police chief. Chief Williams, Captain Williams had been promoted. She wrote, "Judge Caprio, I wanted you to know that Chief Mancuso was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. He pled guilty to all charges. But more importantly, we've rebuilt this department from the ground up. We have new training programs, community policing initiatives, and transparency measures. For the first time in years, our officers are proud to wear their badges again. But the letter that really got to me came from Officer Rodriguez's wife, Carmen. She wrote, "Judge Caprio, because of what you did, my husband's case was finally resolved fairly. The real evidence came out after Chief Mancuso was arrested. Tommy was exonerated completely. He's back on the job and loving it again. Our family will never forget what you did for justice." Chief Mancuso learned the hard way that nobody, and I mean nobody, runs this town except the law itself. He thought his badge made him untouchable. He thought his connections gave him power over the courts. He thought he could intimidate a federal investigation. He thought wrong. "You know what my father taught me when I was just a kid? Frank," he'd say in his thick Italian accent, "power without humility is just corruption waiting to happen." He was right. Chief Mancuso had all the power in the world, badge, uniform, connections, files on, everyone, but he had no humility whatsoever. And that's exactly what brought him down. I still think about that day sometimes. How one man's arrogance exposed years of systematic corruption. How the FBI used my courtroom to catch a criminal who happened to wear a badge. How 30 people witnessed justice in real time. How democracy actually worked the way it's supposed to. But mostly, I think about Officer Santos and Detective Torres and all the good police officers who serve with honor every single day. They deserve better than corrupt leaders. They deserve our respect, our support, and our trust. And that trust has to be earned through integrity, not demanded through intimidation. Chief Mancuso thought he could intimidate me into submission. He thought his badge gave him immunity. He thought his threats would make me back down. He thought wrong. In my courtroom, the only thing that matters is the law, and the law applies to everyone equally, from the homeless veteran to the police chief, from the single mother to the federal agent. You know what that case taught me after 40 years on the bench? That's sometimes the biggest. Criminals are the ones who are supposed to protect us from crime. But it also taught me that justice has a way of finding corruption, no matter how high up it goes, no matter how many connections someone has, no matter how many files they keep on people. The system worked that day. The FBI did their job, I did my job, and justice was served. Not perfect justice. Chief Mancuso's corruption had damaged a lot of lives over the years, but accountability was finally achieved. So the next time someone tells you they're above the law, remember Chief Robert Mancuso. Remember what happened when he tried to intimidate a federal investigation in my courtroom. Remember that in America, in a democracy, nobody runs this town except the Constitution itself. And remember this: when good people stand up to bullies, when institutions work the way they're supposed to, when nobody gets special treatment because of their position or connections, that's when democracy wins. I'm Frank Caprio. Remember, sometimes the best judgment is not in the book, it's in your heart. But when it comes to corruption, the book is pretty clear. Nobody is above the law. Thanks for listening, and God bless. E.